up Goodrich tires. If ever you're not satisfied with one of our tires, please feel free to bring it back. Thank you, Discount Tire.
All right, a shot of the room, which is packed with media members from all over Chicago, Boston, and national baseball writers, as well as they cover the announcement that Theo Epstein will be the new president of baseball operations for the Chicago Cubs. Expecting later in the week, in the next week or so, Jed Hoyer, Jason McLeod to be announced as well. But today is Theo Epstein's day, and it's a dawning of a new day for the Chicago Cubs and their large Cubs Nation fan base. And as you said to me, we were walking in, you said, this is the start of renewed hope.
That's what it's all about. That's exactly what's going on right now. This is phase one. I mean, we're talking about something that's going to have 6, 7 phases. This is going to take a little bit of time. But I'm loving what I'm hearing all about him, his background, his history. All these things make sense. The way he operates, it's so interesting to me. He talked about making changes in places where there's going to be where there needs to be change, and doing it quickly and swiftly and getting it done. Outside of that, also understanding that if something's working properly, he's not going to shy away from it. He's going to keep it in place if it's doing its thing. So this is going to be an opportunity today to meet him and to get moving in the right direction.
Well, very interesting day for Cubs fans who have waited for this for a long time. The Ricketts family took ownership just about 2 years ago, and now they're making their first real major move.
Well, you knew it was going to take time. You believed that that some things had to happen and fall into place. To get your guy meant spending some time to get your guy, and I think there was a lot of naysayers, a lot of doubters out there about the Ricketts family and what they were doing to go about their business. But you sit here today, I don't think there's been another owner in the city of Chicago of any of the sports franchises that really has impressed his fan base nearly as much as he has. I'm going to say in the last probably 20 or 30 years. This has been a really, really phenomenally done deal. I mean, he went out and got his guy. I mean, that's what's so impressive to me, and the whole group of these guys coming together. It took time to put it together. That, to me, is impressive, and they got it done.
All right, Theo Epstein and the Chicago Cubs management team entering the room, and we will get you to the press conference in just a moment as soon as they start the official announcement. But, not a well-kept secret after a while. Once it broke, it was inevitable that Theo Epstein was leaving Boston and coming to the Chicago Cubs. And it's an interesting day because we want to hear a lot of what his plan is when he hits the ground running. A lot of moves to make. The World Series could be over as quickly as tomorrow night. So let's send you now to the podium for the announcement.
It's an exciting day as the Chicago Cubs introduce new baseball leadership to the organization. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Cubs Chairman Tom Ricketts for opening remarks and to introduce our new President of Baseball Operations. Tom?
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Friendly Confines. It was almost 2 years ago today that I first addressed most of the people in this room as the new chairman of the Chicago Cubs. Back then, I said we had 3 priorities. We said that we wanted to be a good neighbor, and we have gone about that and raised more money for charitable organizations than ever and reached out to our community more than ever. Another priority we had was to preserve Wrigley Field, and we continue to work toward a solution that will help us get over the significant challenges we have here in our 100-year-old ballpark. But the first goal, the most important goal that we outlined on that day, was to win a World Series. Today, we take a major step toward achieving that goal with the announcement of our new President of Baseball Operations, Theo Epstein. We began this search in August, and I said at that point we were looking for someone with a background in player development, someone who had a proven track record of success, someone who had a strong analytical background, and someone who had experience in creating a culture of winning. It was also important to me that this person would not be someone who was content with their past successes, but someone who would build on those successes to improve themselves and to improve the organization that they're with. Given these criteria that we laid out, I simply cannot imagine a better person for this job than Theo Epstein. Theo will assume the title of Baseball Operations, President of Baseball Operations, reporting directly to me. He will ultimately be responsible for all activities related to the baseball side of the Chicago Cubs organization. It will be my job to give him and all of his staff all the support that I can. I want to thank everyone on the baseball staff. Over the past few months, the entire baseball organization has stayed together, stepped up, and worked very hard. And of course, I can't say enough about acting General Manager Randy Bush, who has been a consummate professional and a valuable advisor throughout this process. I also want to thank our President of Business Operations, Crane Kenny. Crane is an excellent baseball executive who worked very hard to put this deal together, and his participation in the process has been critical to its success. I would also like to thank my family, both as supportive siblings and diligent directors. This process has had a few interesting moments, but they were always steadfast in their support of me and their commitment to bringing the right leadership to our baseball organization. From a personal standpoint, while I enjoyed executing the search process, I'm glad it's over. As the team chairman, I'm extremely pleased with the results of our search. And as a fan, I'm truly excited about the future of this team. But now it's time to go to work. But we look forward to going to work because we believe that the Chicago Cubs have the best fans in baseball. We know that we have the best ballpark in baseball. And we look forward to the day where we can say that we have the best team in baseball. And we are confident that our new president of baseball operations will lead us to that day. And with that, I'd like to introduce Theo Epstein.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for coming today. Yeah, I've waited a few weeks to say this, but it truly feels great to be a Cub today. I'd like to start by thanking Tom and the entire Ricketts family for putting their faith in me and for giving me this incredible opportunity. I wouldn't be here without your commitment to the fans and without your long-term vision for the organization. I'd also like to thank Crane Kenny for working tirelessly to get this transaction done. Crane, I've really enjoyed my brief time working with you so far, and I look forward to working closely with you as my partner on the business side of the organization. I'd like to thank Randy Bush and the entire baseball operations department for being diligent stewards during this transition period. I've been around leadership changes in baseball, and I've been around interim GM situations before. I know it's not easy. So great job, Randy. Great job, guys. I'd also like to thank Jim Henry, whom I really admire, for giving his all to this organization for 17 years, and especially for staying on this summer under really unique circumstances to finish off signing a very strong draft class. That really showed how much Jim put the Cubs' interest in front of his own interest, and I hope I can demonstrate that same class and loyalty to the Cubs during my tenure here. Also like to thank Cubs fans for being so incredibly welcoming to me and my family already. I appreciate your faith in me and promise to repay you with the hard work and dedication that you deserve. I'd like to thank John Henry, Tom Werner, and Larry Lucchino, not only for allowing this move to happen, but for giving me my original opportunity as a GM 9 years ago, and for supporting me along the way, personally and professionally. Also, a quick thank you to Terry Francona, the players, all my coworkers and friends at the Red Sox, including the fans. Thanks for all the great times there. I'm really proud of what we accomplished together, and I wish you nothing but the best going forward. And good luck today, Ben. Finally, I'd like to thank my beautiful wife, Marie, who's been by my side for 10 years, and without whose support, this move wouldn't be possible. And to Jack at home, I love you, buddy. I was so fortunate to spend a decade in the Red Sox organization, and I consider myself very, very lucky to be a Cub today. It truly is an honor and a privilege to join such a special organization. To me, baseball is better with tradition. Baseball is better with history. Baseball is better with fans who care. Baseball is better in ballparks like this. Baseball is better during the day. And baseball is best of all when you win. That ultimately is why I'm here today. With this ownership and with this fan support, I firmly believe that we can preserve all of those things I just mentioned that make the Cubs so special, and over time build a consistent winner, a team that is playing baseball in October regularly, and a team that will ultimately win the World Series. But that does not happen overnight, and it certainly does not happen because of any one person. Over time and together, we will build a solid foundation that delivers sustained success for the Cubs. That foundation for sustained success starts with a commitment to scouting and player development. Not just the words, but the actions. The Ricketts family already demonstrated that commitment with an aggressive draft this past summer, and through our actions, we'll demonstrate that commitment every single day. Our goal will be to build the best scouting department in the game, one that makes an annual impact in the draft and internationally. As far as player development goes, we will define and implement a Cubs way of playing the game, and we won't rest until there's a steady stream of talent coming through the minor league system, trained in that Cubs way, making an impact out here at Wrigley Field. Building a foundation for sustained success also requires a team of people working passionately to support a common vision of what the Cubs can become. A big part of my job is to build a dynamic baseball operations department that is progressive, effective, and united. I plan to bring in some of the best and the brightest from outside the organization, but I also plan to sit down and learn from all the talented people who have served the Cubs so well over the years. Together, we'll work to define and implement a new vision for the Cubs. A foundation for sustained success also means creating sound decision-making processes. There are hundreds of small decisions that baseball front offices make every day, little opportunities to impact the organization. And our goal will be to create sound results through sound process. To that end, we'll use every bit of available information, traditional scouting on one hand and objective data on the other hand, so that our evaluations can come into greater focus. We also pledge to dig deep with research and development to try to find that next great competitive advantage that will push the Cubs forward. Building a foundation for success also means creating a winning culture at the big league level. Our fans deserve a clubhouse full of players who are proud to wear the Cubs uniform and who are as passionate about winning as they are. Our players, on the other hand, deserve to know that their teammates have their backs, and they deserve to know that the organization will always be honest with them and will work hard to put them in a position to succeed. We're going to have to grind our way to the top, and we must do so together. It will be a lot of work. Good thing we are ready and we are hungry. As I mentioned earlier, when we do achieve that sustained success and ultimately win a World Series, it will not happen because of any one person. It will happen because of all of us. It will happen because one of our area scouts drives the extra 6 miles to get that one last look at a prospect before the draft. It'll happen because a rookie ball pitching coach comes out every day to early work until he finally finds that right grip for a young pitcher's changeup. It will happen because someone from our international staff takes the extra time to really get to know a 17-year-old kid and helps make his transition to the States that much easier. It will happen because a fringe prospect in AA buys into the Cubs' way, takes responsibility for his own development, and turns himself into a big piece of our big league puzzle. It will happen because our major league coaching staff is more prepared than their counterparts across the field. It'll happen because our major league players band together, support each other, overcome adversity, and work really hard to make our fans proud. It will not be any one person. It will be all of us with the Chicago Cubs. I believe we will do it, and I really can't wait to help lead the way. So, Tom, thanks again for the opportunity. Can't wait to get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Theo. We can now open it up for questions and answers. We do have a pair of wireless microphones available. Please wait until you have a microphone in hand before asking your question.
You're going to spot the question askers.
And please identify yourself and your publication before asking the question.
Okay.
Tom, Theo, welcome to Chicago.
Thank you.
Bruce Levine, ESPN, Chicago. As far as addressing your managerial situation, how quickly do you want to talk to Mike, your coaches, and set up what you need to do in timely fashion.
Yeah, I've already had a couple nice phone conversations with Mike Quaddy. And we have plans to meet in person sometime over the next week. So, Mike seems like a great guy, and he's developed a great reputation over many decades in this game. So I look forward to sitting down with him in person as a first step, sharing with him my vision for the organization. I'd like to hear his vision for the organization. We have to talk about some things that have happened over the last year or so, but I look forward to that process of exchanging information, sharing our visions, and then we'll get together as a group and decide where we go from there.
Theo, Phil Rogers, Chicago Tribune. You referenced the Cubs 2011 draft, but I'm just wondering, as it was happening at the time, how you looked at the Cubs spending in that draft in Latin America in that period, because it's somewhat atypical of how previous operations have been. And do you think you would be here had they not been that aggressive last summer?
Yeah, as the Cubs draft went on, we were sitting in our draft room and we could tell what they were doing. And I think we looked at each other in the draft room and we said, hey, they get it. I think they finally get it. They're going for it. And, I think that the dollars that we spend in the draft and the dollars that we spend internationally are some of the best dollars that we spend in the industry, the best investments that we make. So it was a clear philosophical change, in my opinion, and and a new direction that they've taken over the last 6 months. So I think that got my attention. It got everyone's attention in the game. It certainly aligns well with my vision for how to run a baseball operation. So I'd say it was a significant moment.
Theo, Jim Rose from ABC7 here in Chicago. You grew up as a Red Sox fan, having been born in Brookline, Massachusetts. How tough was it for you to make this change after having so much success at Boston?
Sure. I had a great 10 years with the Red Sox. We had a lot of fun, a lot of success. We won 2 World Series. We got to see the baseball operations department grow. We got to see the business side grow. We got to see the ballpark improve. We got to see how the city responded. I would never change it. I got to make friends that will last a lifetime, and I got to share it all with my family. So I would never trade that experience for everything. But I do believe, Bill Walsh of the 49ers said it best, that after about 10 years in sports, there comes a time when you have to consider change for the benefit not only of the individual involved, but also for the benefit of the organization. And I wouldn't trade my time with the Red Sox, but I do think it was time to move on. They're in great hands, and they have a terrific future laid out in front of them. And I was ready for the next big challenge, and this is certainly the ultimate challenge. I'm ready to embrace it and move forward.
Hey, Theo, John Greenberg, ESPN Chicago. What do you see? We've talked about rebuilding. People aren't sure this lineup's kind of in flux a little bit. Mm-hmm. How comfortable are you with that, and where do you see the next couple of years going, what you have now?
Sure. I talked in my remarks about building a foundation for sustained success, and that really is the goal, not just to have one good season and then fall back. It's to do things the right way, build it up through scouting and player development, establish a foundation that allows you to have sustained success year in, year out. So that's going to be something that we focus on every single day, all of us in baseball operations, building that foundation. But there's a parallel front. At the same time, we're going to be working on the Major League club, because every season represents a new opportunity to win. Every opportunity to win is sacred. It's sacred to us inside the organization. It should be sacred to the fans as well. And they deserve our best efforts to do what we can to improve the club, to put the club in a position to succeed in any given season. So those are the 2 parallel fronts we're going to be operating on. We're going to dedicate a lot of time to building that foundation, and also a lot of time and energy and creative thought to see what we can do to make the Cubs as competitive as possible, as good a baseball team as possible, and win as many games as possible. I will say, the decisions that we make will be with the best interest of the Cubs over the long haul in mind, because we need to do this the right way. There are no shortcuts in baseball, but we're going to be working on both fronts. Opportunities to win are sacred, and building a foundation for long-term success is fundamental.
Theo, I'm David Kaplan from WJ Radio Comcast Sportsnet. There's been a lot of talk about culture change here at Wrigley Field. When you hear that term, culture change, in the clubhouse, in the organization, what does that mean to you?
It means a couple different things. I think the easiest way to start to change the culture is in the front office, and that essentially involves a lot of hard work. It involves setting high standards. It involves coming together around a common vision for the organization and getting everyone to buy in that it's the most important thing in the world to us. And essentially just working so hard that it creates a culture of responsibility, a culture of achievement, a culture of high standards. And if you're not ready to buy into that, you're probably not going to be along for the ride. That same thing happens in the big league clubhouse. We can set the tone in the front office, and ultimately the manager and major league coaching staff will be and the veteran leadership on the club will be responsible for setting that same tone, establishing a winning culture in the major league clubhouse. And that involves players prioritizing winning. It involves players having each other's back. It involves players taking seriously the responsibilities that come with the job, preparation, fitness, being ready to play every single day, and understanding that winning is the single most important thing. So cultural changes don't come easily, and you can't fake them, but I think you have to do it through hard work, and we're ready to do that.
Theo, Rick Morrissey from the Chicago Sun-Times. You've made it pretty clear here that this is a team effort, but what makes you think that you can do what no one else has been able to do in 103 years?
Right. Well, again, it won't be me doing it. It'll be all of us doing it. When I got to Boston, and I promise not to refer to the Red Sox in every answer, but I think it's apropos here because there are a lot of similarities. And when I got to Boston, they hadn't won in 86 years, and we didn't run from that challenge. We embraced it, and we decided that the way to attack it was to build the best baseball operation that we could, to try to establish a winning culture, to work as hard as possible, and to bring in players who cared more about each other and more about winning than what the people around them thought, or the external expectations or the external mindset. So that's something that is going to be important to us here as well. I just talked about it. We're going to build the best baseball operation we can. We're going to change the culture. Our players are going to change the culture along with us in the major league clubhouse, and we're going to make building a foundation for sustained success a priority. That'll lead to playing October baseball more often than not down the road. And once you get in October, there's a legitimate chance to win the World Series. So I believe we can do it, and I look forward to helping.
Theo, Pedro Gomez from ESPN.
Hey, Pedro.
When you took over the Sox, that was a roster, an organization that was ready. I mean, in your first year, LCS, second year, World Series champs. How do you view where the Cubs are today as you take over on day one?
Right. Well, I certainly think that there's a gap between where we are and where we want to be, and that doesn't affect the work that we do to build that foundation. That's going to start through scouting and player development, but it does impact how we look at our other primary responsibility, which is taking advantage of those sacred opportunities to win. We're going to have to have a high hit rate. We're going to have to take a creative look at the big league team and work extremely hard to put them in a position to contend next year and in the years that follow. But it can be done. It can be done. There are lots of examples of teams coming off difficult seasons, pushing all the right buttons, and all of a sudden being in contention. That doesn't always happen, and there's more variability when you're in that type of situation. But we're going to do our best on that front, even as the important daily work of building a foundation for long-term success continues on the parallel front.
Theo, hi. David Schuster from WSCR Radio, and welcome to Chicago, first of all. It took a long time for you to get in here, and now that you are in charge, supposedly one of the hang-ups was a compensation package. Now that you are in charge, are you to figure out the final touches for the compensation package for you coming in here?
Well, the first thing I'll say about that is the Cubs and Red Sox have a great working relationship. They've had one for years. They're going to have one together going forward in the future. There are a lot of solid relationships on both ends, and they were able to make a lot of progress. I'm being announced as the president of baseball operations here today. Ben Cherington is going to be announced as the general manager of the Red Sox, and both organizations are going to move forward, and we're able to attack the offseason with all we have. The issue of compensation, I'm sure will be addressed in coming weeks, either between the clubs, which will give their best efforts to try to get it done, or ultimately by a third party. But I think the bigger picture here is that we got it done. The organizations are still allied and have amicable relations, and we can move forward.
Tom, Barry Rosner, Daily Herald. Tom, you were adamant about not wanting to bring in a baseball guy or not needing a baseball guy to run the entire baseball operation. Did you change your mind on that, or was it a case of having to elevate Theo in order to get him?
Well, I mean, I think that no matter how you look at it, ultimately there has to be one person who's responsible for the decisions of the baseball organization and accountable for the results in the baseball organization. As of last summer, it was Jim, and as of today, it's Theo. And it all has to come up to one person who's responsible. And so I think ultimately that's basically how it works. So last summer, when that question was asked, I said I wasn't going to hire someone over Jim to second guess or to watch him, and I'm not going to do the same thing to Theo. It'll be his decisions, and he'll be accountable for the results.
Theo and Tom, George Hoffman from News Radio WBBM. Tom, can you take us through the process? Was Theo originally on your short list? And if so, because the Red Sox appeared as if they were going to go to the playoffs and he had one more year left on his contract, did you view him then as a long shot?
Well, on the process, the way I managed it was we started without any list. The first thing we did was take a look at all 30 teams and see what kind of results each of those teams had produced over the past 10 years, both in terms of wins, win percentage, win consistency, win efficiency. We studied all the wins, and we also studied all the systems in baseball, and which of those were most consistent in creating major league players, which ones had the most major league ready players in their system, and which systems on average were the best. And when you do all that, you come up with a handful of teams that seem to rise above. That's where we focused our energies. On the side, what I was doing is I talked to about 20 people in Major League Baseball whom I trust, people that would maybe understand our situation and be able to give me a candid and confidential assessment of what I should be looking for, and in a perfect world, who I should be looking for. And that ran through the end of the season, and we knew that we were not going to reach out to anyone until after the season. But by the end of that process, it was apparent to me that Theo was the best man for this job. We waited till the right moment to address that with the Red Sox, and then move forward.
Theo, Rich, KWGN-TV in Chicago. This club has been at the bottom of the league in errors the last couple of years. How do you mentioned about playing the Cub way? How do you change that, and how quickly can you change that mentality of fundamental baseball?
Sure. Well, defense is an integral part of the game. Run prevention as a whole, pitching and defense, is essential if you're going to have a winning club, and it really does start with good fundamental play, and that's something that we have to prioritize, not just at the big league level, but throughout the organization. We have to create the Cubs way touches all aspects of the game, and there will be a player development manual with the appropriate way to play defense at every position, expectations that we have for our players, not just offensively but also defensively. And once we build this foundation, that Cubs way will be integrated vertically, so that we're playing the game the same way in the Dominican Summer League as we are in rookie ball, as we are in AA, as we are at the big league level. So that's a real opportunity to create a competitive advantage. If we can be sound fundamentally on the defensive side of the ball and with base running up and down the organization, that will help us get where we want to go.
Hi, Ed Sherman from Crane Chicago Business. This is for both of you. I'm wondering, how would you characterize the discussions that you had, what was discussed, and Theo, how important was it for you to get commitments from Tom on front office staff and also payroll?
We had great discussions. We sat down and basically talked baseball for 5 or 6 hours, and we, I shared my experience with the Red Sox, things I thought we had done well, things I thought that we can do better, things I've learned from my time there that I could possibly apply going forward with the new organization. Shared my vision for how I thought the Cubs should be run going forward over the next period of time. And Tom shared his experience. He's learned a lot about the game in the last 2 years, and I really respect his approach, getting out in the field, going down to visit the minor league staff and the scouts and spending time with them so he could get a feel for not just the macroeconomic picture of the game at the ownership level, but also down in the trenches, how winning organizations are built. So we talked baseball for a long time, and that I thought we really made a connection, and that made this a more attractive option for me. As far as commitments that he made, I think we were open and honest with one another. It's clear that we'll have an opportunity to grow the baseball operations staff. I think we have to do that to build as dynamic an operation as we want, and it's also clear that there are more than enough resources here for us to win. It'll be up to me to decide how to allocate those resources, not just with the major league payroll, but in the draft, internationally, with hiring talented scouts and field staff. So there's a great opportunity here.
Theo, David Schuster again. You penned a really thoughtful article that ran in the Boston Globe, and one of the things that you wrote in there was there's almost like a limitation of how long sometimes you can hang around in an organization in sports, and I don't know what the time frame was. Can you expound on that and why that is in sports?
Yeah, I mentioned it in the article this morning. I cited Bill Walsh, who is widely respected. And he had this theory, and others have had the same theory, that after about 10 years in sports, it reaches a time where you kind of need a new vision for the organization, and where a coach or an executive maybe needs a new challenge, a new landscape to apply his own principles. So I don't know if that's an across-the-board rule. It actually applies to other high-pressure jobs as well. If you look at university presidents, for example, usually their peak effectiveness is for the first decade on the job, and after that they either move on or lose effectiveness. So we got a lot we can do and a lot we can accomplish in the next 10 years if that repeats itself. But I'm really happy to be a Cub and looking forward to being a Cub for a long time.
Theo, David Hoff from the Chicago Tribune. How much of the Cubs opening, though, influenced or accelerated that thinking in your own head because of the opportunity that existed here? And Tom, maybe you could address it. How well aware were you that he might be ready to move on from Boston?
Well, my focus was on the Red Sox. I mean, we had a lot to do. We had, one of the most talented teams in baseball on the field, and we were in the midst of a great season that unfortunately ended with disappointment. But as I mentioned in the op-ed piece this morning, for a little while now, I've started to, those words of Bill Walsh have been resonating with me a little bit, and so I just had it in the back of my mind that there would probably be a transition upcoming. Helped train Ben Cherington, who's more than capable of taking over as my successor. And once we got through the season, all of a sudden we were in a position at the Red Sox to have to hire a new manager. I felt like that was something that was best done by Ben, because he was going to be there for the long haul. And then when the Cubs called, frankly, that really got my attention because of the history, because of the tradition, because of the Ricketts commitment to winning, because of the ballpark and the fans, and because of the fact that we haven't won a World Series in a really long time. The two best parts of my job of the last decade that I had with the Red Sox, the first thing was helping to build a scouting and player development machine, from the ground floor, getting in the trenches with the guys and helping write the player development manual, the scouting manual, building it from the ground up, and ultimately helping to produce big league players that helped us win games. And the other great thing, probably the best part of being with the Red Sox, was playing a small part in winning that World Series in 2004. And getting to see the looks on people's faces, the joy that it brought them, the families that were hanging Red Sox pennants on the graves and cemeteries, that ride from Logan Airport to Fenway Park, where we saw businessmen and women stopping in the middle of the street when they saw our bus, getting out and hugging each other, construction workers hugging each other up on top of buildings. And it really impacted the whole region of the country and generations of families. So the Cubs opportunity provides me a forum, provides us a forum to do both those things. We can build a scouting and player development operation from the ground up, do it together, and end up having lots of players come through the system under the Cubs way, play right here at Wrigley. And, you know, when we build that foundation for sustained success and it ultimately results in a World Series, it's gonna be more than just a World Series. It's gonna impact a lot of people, a lot of Cubs fans, a lot of Cubs families who for generations have waited and waited for a World Series. So you know, the two best things about my Red Sox experience, I may have a chance to try to recreate here. So sure, it got my attention and made me consider making that move.
David, with respect to the part of your question addressed to me, I really had no idea. You know, we just had to, you know, we went through our analysis, and I looked at it, and I said, well, before we move forward, I want to go see if there's a chance that we can talk to Theo. After about 10 or 15 minutes of our conversation, I knew this was the guy that we needed here. So we're just, after that, it was just a matter of just, you know, going through the process and executing.
Theo Sahadi Sharma, ESPN Chicago. Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you.
Talk about a change in philosophies. One of the things the Cubs were probably farthest behind in respect to the Red Sox is statistical analysis. Can you just talk about how important that aspect is to building a winning team and how you'll go about building that part of the front office?
Sure. Well, my personal approach is that the best organizations use both traditional scouting at its best and objective analysis at its best, and you can look at each of those paradigms as a lens through which to view the player. So if you hire the best scouts, put them in a position to see the players at the right time, and get good, solid, accurate scouting reports, you see the player through a strong traditional scouting lens. If you hire the best analysts, get the most accurate data, make the best adjustments, do the most thorough analysis, and you come out with the best available statistical information, that's another lens, an objective lens through which to view the player. But the way to see the player most accurately, to get the truest picture of the player, is to put both those lenses together and look through them simultaneously, and you get a pretty darn accurate picture of the player. So that was my approach as I came up through the game, you know, literally sitting between the scouting director and the stats analyst at the Padres, and that's how I formed my way of looking at the game. That's the approach we tried to use at the Red Sox, and I'd like to bring that same approach here with the Cubs.
Theo, Mike Dodd from USA Today. In the short term, with the player payroll you'll have to work with next year, will it be higher or lower, about the same as the Cubs had this year?
Sure. Well, I have a personal policy. The Boston writers will know this well. I have a personal policy of never commenting at all on player payroll issues. I just think it's to the club's advantage to not promulgate any of that information or talk about our future plans. But I'll say this, as I said earlier, there are more than enough resources here to win. There are tremendous revenues, and we'll have a very significant amount of resources on the baseball side to allocate as we see fit. It doesn't necessarily mean it's all going to go into Major League payroll right away. There could be an opportunity to do that. It depends how the market plays itself out, and I'll have a better feel for that after I dig deeper about the organization and our needs. But it could be that we allocate some of those resources to the draft internationally, to building up an even better infrastructure for scouting and player development. So there are a lot of resources here, and ultimately it'll be up to us with the decisions that we make over time to put them to good use.
Theo, Phil Rogers, Chicago Tribune again. While you say you have more than enough resources to win, and while the Red Sox were close when you got there or were promoted to GM, Fenway Park today looks totally different than it did 10 years ago, and the Red Sox have tapped into revenue streams in that decade that have been just marked. How much of your optimism in thinking you can succeed here is tied into the ability to replicate that success on the business side? Well, I know you're a baseball guy. It certainly has impact.
Yeah. Well, Yeah, I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to the game. So I'm truly lucky to have had the opportunity to work at Fenway Park for 10 years, and incredibly lucky to call Wrigley Field home now. Those are my two favorite ballparks in the game. Yeah, I'll just say this: during my time with the Red Sox, I got to see how important it was to renovate the ballpark. And when I even growing there as a kid through the 80s and into the 90s, the park had started to fall into disrepair a little bit. It was still a great place, but it wasn't as great a place to watch a game as maybe it had been earlier. And I was lucky in getting there in 2002. That was right around the time that the renovation started, and the impact was tremendous. It improved the fan experience fantastically. It generated revenues at a remarkable clip, and then that in turn allowed us on the baseball side to take those revenues and pour them into our baseball operation, which allowed us to get to the level we wanted to be and stay there. And beyond that, it had a significant impact on the city. Fenway Park became this jewel of Boston that everyone who came to town had to see and had to experience. And so, sure, if we're lucky enough to follow those same steps here in Chicago with Wrigley Field, it will only mean great things for the fans, great things for our revenues, which in turn means great things for our baseball operations, and great things for the city of Chicago.
Theo, Christina Carl from ESPN.com. Welcome to Chicago.
Thank you.
From Jim Fry to Jim Hendry, there's been a lot of money spent on post-prime free agents in Cubs history. I'm curious about how you're interested in changing the dynamic in terms of attracting the very best to this team in this market.
So I couldn't hear the whole question. It was about post-prime free agents and changing that.
How do you want to change the dynamic, or how do you anticipate changing the dynamic to attract the very best on the market to this team in this market?
Okay. Well, I think baseball players have a prime age. There's an age range, starting somewhere around 26, 27, ending somewhere around 31, 32, that in which you get the best production, the best bang for your buck with the player. So, clearly we're going to have a diversified roster with a lot of young players under control. We're going to have some players through their arbitration years, and we're sure to have some veterans in their free agent years as well. I think if we do our jobs the right way, we'll have as many players in their prime, hopefully homegrown impact type players who are moving into their prime years and still in their prime years, because I think that's the best formula to build a winning baseball club. Now, that said, there's an important role for veterans and veteran leadership. And I think the key is to make sure that you pay, and I've learned this lesson through the years the hard way as well. The key is to pay for future performance, not for past performance.
Theo, Al Hamnick from the Times of Northwest Indiana. Welcome to our city.
Thank you.
You've accomplished a lot of great things early in your life. What's the quality or trait that you feel you possess that separates you from a lot of other leaders in the game?
That's a tough one. Ability to stay inconspicuous at Starbucks in the Chicago area, maybe, or maybe not so much in hindsight. I don't know. I mean, I've had my colleagues tell me, my friends tell me in the game that it's competitiveness. That I think a lot of people in the game are competitive, but if I was being honest with myself, I'd say I'm probably hyper competitive, maybe overly driven to succeed, and along the same, but at the same time, I don't like to do it individually. I like to get into a bunker with a group of people that I believe in and who believe in me as a leader, develop a vision that we share, and then work our tails off in order to see it through and implement it on the field. There's nothing better in the game than sitting back there and watching players pour champagne over another, and even the guys in the front office and the scouts and the field staff pour champagne on one another, and know that you were there, they were there, working the long nights, putting the hard work in to play a small role in helping to make that happen. So I think my competitiveness and my desire to be part of a group united by a common goal, two characteristics that I think have served me well in some capacities.
Theo, Matt Abaticola, 670 The Score. How do you begin moving forward with the organization and teaching a uniform approach to how baseball is done? And what's a realistic timetable to understanding that the entire organization is moving forward in that direction?
Yeah. Well, I think the first step is to, well, there are two first steps. One, and I mentioned this earlier, one is to actively pursue the best and the brightest out there from other organizations, true impact personnel that we can bring in to immediately make us a better organization. And the second step is to sit down with the talented people here who have served the Cubs well for so long. And I know there's a lot I can learn from them, not just about how the Cubs have operated and things the Cubs do well and things the Cubs do better, but I can learn about the game from them. In this game, there are no definitive answers. If you think you've got it all figured out in this game, you get humbled really quickly. So I look forward to sitting down with the folks that we have here, bringing in the best and the brightest from outside, forming a cohesive unit, and then the next step is sit down and define that vision. There's not one way to play this game. The Cubs way will be a dynamic, living, breathing entity that changes every year. We're going to add to our scouting manual and our player development every year through insights that we develop, through hard work and research, and also through mistakes that we've made and learned to take some things out of that approach. So it's going to start immediately with the people, and then we'll build the processes around that and move forward.
We'll do two more questions before breaking into smaller groups.
Theo, Megan Monmere with the Northwest Herald. During your discussions, did you have any hesitations or concerns about accepting this position?
No, I had some skepticism going in just because I had such a great situation in Boston, and as I discussed earlier, I knew I was probably nearing the end of my tenure there just because I thought it was important to look for the next